The 5-0 Podcast.
5-0 Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the 5-0 Podcast. Today we are here with Ms. Erika Kirk. She's an active law enforcement officer, detective, sex trafficking fighter, boy mom, and female officer voice and advocate. So for our listeners who don't know who you are yet, give them a quick bio about yourself, and then we'll peel back the layers deeper on all things that we talked about above and more.
Oh, well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited to share this space with you. So thank you for having me.
Me too.
Yeah, this is very cool. So I am born and raised in San Diego. I am a detective with the second largest police department in the nation in Southern California. I have almost 20 years with our department, and I have 3 boys at home, a 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and 13-year-old. So I'm just entering that, preteen era with my kids. Yeah. It's kind of crazy, but and then I'm married to a detective who I met on the job. And yeah, that's who I am. I've been in LA since about 2002, and I love it here. This is my home, and I'm grateful to be here.
It's so crazy that you said, you've almost been a police officer 20 years. You look like you're 20 years old. Well, I love it. I'm like, it has me excited for life. Like, if you look that good, 20 years under your belt, 3 boys, I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm going to be okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's this job, as you know, takes a toll on you.
Totally.
And I will say motherhood has been a challenge, but thank you for that. I really do appreciate that.
No,
thank you.
You're welcome. I'm not lying. I'm not just saying that.
Thank you.
So we're going to go over your foundation in law enforcement, and who you are and how you got here. But I like to ask everyone that comes on my podcast about their family life and how they grew up, because I like to see how everyone kind of got to this place, and everyone has such a different story. So tell us about your family life and how it was growing up.
Okay. So like I said, I was born and raised in San Diego. My parents, after they got married, moved from a small town in Colorado and moved to San Diego, not knowing anybody. So I was very close with my family. I have a younger sister who is also a police dispatcher for the same department that I work for. Yeah. And I watched my parents kind of struggle through life. They put in a lot of work and effort into ensuring that my sister and I had a good upbringing. I went to a performing arts school from 6th to 12th grade. And I always thought, I'm going to be an actress or I'm going to be in TV. But my second kind of dream was to be an FBI agent. But it's kind of ironic because I remember my parents telling me, like, you can't be in law enforcement. That's like for, big burly white men, not small, young, Hispanic women.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I grew up. My dad was a referee for soccer. And so I grew up playing sports. I was very competitive. I was kind of a tomboy, but also, just really into like that competitive sport mode. And then when I left home, I went to UNLV. I went to Las Vegas after I graduated high school. And when I was done, I didn't want to go back to San Diego, although I miss it now. But so I moved to Los Angeles. My best girlfriend was in the acting industry, and so she was like, "Move to LA with me." And so that's kind of how I ended up here in LA.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah. So I grew up really close with my family. Not a huge family because, like I said, they came, from Colorado to San Diego, which was kind of a small, tight-knit community there. But I do have a cousin that's on this job. And so he's the one that kind of introduced me initially to law enforcement. So
It's so crazy that
Yeah.
you work for law enforcement, your sister, your cousin. It kind of like it's so funny because it's either I feel like when I ask people, they're either the first and the last, or it's like so many people in their family end up choosing the same career. It's kind of like you can watch someone do this career, like who you're close with, and it like inspires you to do the career. Like my dad is still a police officer, so that like kind of inspired me as well. So it's like it's interesting to know. It's so cool that your sister's a dispatcher.
Yes, it
Does
is.
she
It is
ever
super cool.
work your shift, like dispatch you to calls?
So she used to. I'm not really
Okay.
out in the field like that any longer, but
Right,
she
because you're a
used
detective.
to.
Right.
Yeah, and it's funny because I guess her and I sound a lot alike, and people will always ask, "Hey, is that your sister? You guys
Yeah.
sound so much alike." But yes, there are a few times where she's dispatched calls to me, and I
That is so
record
cool.
them because I'm like, "Oh, that's my sister," and so
Yeah, that's
yeah,
so cool.
it's pretty cool.
I could imagine if and that's a story for another time, but if there's like a, you know, dangerous, interesting call and she would have to dispatch her own sister to it, I wonder how that would feel, but that's so
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
So you moved to LA and you have an acting bug or, something maybe a little bit different than policing. You don't know for sure you're going to go into policing. So what inspired you to become a police officer once you got to LA?
So I think really LA is like a whole different ball game. It's very cutthroat out here. I was a makeup artist, um,
Okay.
and so it didn't provide a lot of stability at the time. And so I was worried. I'm like, what am I going to do for health insurance? And I remember thinking, well, my cousin's on the job, and if I can't join the FBI, maybe I can join the police department. Like I've always wanted to be a detective.
Yeah.
So I kind of just joined the department, not really understanding what I was getting myself into. I had no idea. I had no idea that the hardships that I would face. I had no idea the amount of dedication, sweat, blood, tears that it would take.
Hmm.
Um, and I was shocked to be honest. So I don't. It's hard to say that like I had a true inspiration, but what I will say is that I've always had a knack for helping people. And so I kind of feel like I fell into the right profession for a reason because I love what I do and I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And by the grace of God, I'm still here doing what I love. So yeah, it's been a great ride.
I can totally relate to like everything you're saying. Like I went to school for theater as well.
Oh,
And
okay.
I wasn't a makeup artist, but I was dancing and trying to pursue that. I wasn't making enough money. What am I going to do for health insurance? I started bartending and then the career kind of came to me as well. So I can totally relate. And I feel like it's definitely the perfect place. And also, it's kind of like funny, but you kind of are a little hometown celebrity when you walk around. So you
Oh,
kind of get the like, you're not an actor, but you do get like a little bit like when you walk out in uniform, people, I mean, hopefully, people are nice and they say hi and stuff. So it's kind of like you get a little taste of that LA
yeah.
celebrity in
And
a
yeah,
way.
so my mom reminds me of that all the time. And when I told her like, "Oh, I'm going to do this podcast," she's like, "Ah, see, I knew you'd make it to the big time." I'm like, "Oh, thanks, mom."
Exactly. You get,
Yeah.
you get a little taste. Um,
Yeah.
so you've worked in a ton of units, and I've done my research on you. But what has been your favorite unit or experience role that you have worked in this almost 20 years in law enforcement? If you could pick one.
If I had to pick one, so I really love what I do now. It's very fulfilling. I work our officer representation section. I get to represent officers in their hard times. It's very fulfilling. But I will say that my most fun job that I had was definitely working Vice. So early in my career, I worked at a division that had the second largest street walking prostitution track in the nation. And by chance, they kind of asked me to come and work the unit. And I, again, didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And here I am, 27 years old, working as an undercover prostitute. Um,
Wow.
And people laughed. They're like, how is that fun? But it was exciting. And part of that was, reaching out to young victims that are in that life and trying to save them. So I think that was probably the most fun I had on the department. It kind of led to bigger things. I went into the human-wide human trafficking task force. And at the time, human trafficking was this big buzz. No one understood it. No one believed that it was happening in their backyards. And I worked in a division where it was prevalent. It was rampant.
I can imagine in LA and California, it's probably a lot. Yeah.
It was huge. And so where I worked, it was a corridor between, it was initially like the truck stop. It was a truck route. So truckers coming from Northern California would drive along this Sepulveda corridor and pass through to get to the south. And so it was a whole nother world for me. But it was definitely the most fun that I had on this job.
That is so fun. I always wanted to get into Vice. I think it's so cool that you went undercover. I'm sure you have really interesting stories. So maybe we'll get to that. Maybe you could tell us one. Okay, really cool. So you did kind of touch on how maybe your family didn't know that you were capable or a lot of us, even myself, I didn't know I could be a police officer. Did you have any pushback from family or friends while in this career or when choosing this career? Have you lost people along the way? Tell us a little bit about that.
Thankfully, I haven't lost anyone, but I will say that growing up, kind of in, I would say, a more liberal town, if you will, a lot of people had disdain for the police, just kind of in general. Thankfully, my parents never really had that same disdain, and so they were really supportive with that. But I had a lot of questions from friends that, like, how could you do that job? Like, what do you do? And how do you, how can you even relate to them? It was always, the cops and then everyone else. And I think early on in my career, I had the ability to kind of show all of my friends, hey, we're not all, the stereotypical, these bad cops that are out there just out to arrest people. And so I've had such an amazing group of people that have supported me along the way that I didn't know how that would, work out. But thankfully, they're so supportive. All of my friends, all of my family. There are a few people who are, kind of anti-cop, defund the police bandwagon, and that's okay. And sometimes we go head to head, but at the end of the day, it's about mutual respect. And so we might not always, see eye to eye, but there's always been that level of respect. And so I'm super grateful for that.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think a lot of people don't understand that, like, we don't only have friends who are like, back the blue, have a sign in their front yard, like, I have friends that have a lot of different views, and I'm sure living in California, you have a lot of friends that have a lot of different views, but as long as you have a mutual respect and, you can see each other's side, you can have healthy conversations, like, people don't realize that we don't just associate and just hang out with other cops or other people that have the same opinions as us. And it's really important to surround yourself with people with different opinions so you can see different sides. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say that I feel like I'm blessed with a lot of friends. I have a great group of friends, both on the job and off the job. And I love that I've been able to kind of marry the two. So my cop friends are really good friends with my non-cop friends. Yeah. And it's all about love and support. And so again, I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. I can relate to that too. And my friends love it. They're like, I love hanging out with you and your cop friends. How are all you girls cops? Oh my God, you're so
right.
Whatever. Yeah. Okay, love it. So, do you have advice for? And this was the most like DM'd question I got when I posted that I was going to be interviewing you. I had a lot of questions from females saying, "What is her advice for me beginning this career?" Can you ask her that? So, since you've been in it so long and you've done so much in your career, how did you get to like where you're at? Like what do you attribute getting to where you're at from the time you started to where you are now?
So it's kind of two-part. I'm a firm believer in mentorship. And I didn't realize that early on in my career. And so I think my very first piece of advice, first and foremost, is that your reputation will always follow you. And you have to remember, yes, so your reputation always follows you. And the crazy thing is that, like, even if you don't do something right, people are still going to talk about you and say maybe you did it. But kind of owning your mistake, you might not be the fastest runner. You might not be the best shooter. But you have to be authentic with all of that, unapologetic, right? And so be yourself. Be yourself. And if you're really girly, that's okay. You don't have to be this
Amen,
big,
honey.
Tough, burly guy. But the second part to that is throughout this department, I didn't realize that there was a group of women or people that supported women on this department in this male-dominated profession. And so thankfully, I was part of the Los Angeles Women Police Officers and Associates. It's a nonprofit organization or association specifically for Southern California and women within our department that are there to mentor, uplift, encourage the advancement of women in this male-dominated profession. And so I know that there's so many women that are on smaller agencies, smaller departments that feel like they don't have that support. And I think it's really difficult to get through your assignment when you don't have that support. And it's key to seek out organizations like this or like the National Association for Women in Law Enforcement. There's so many organizations and groups out there to support women. But finding that network of people, because you can't do this alone.
Exactly.
And sometimes I'll talk to young, new officers and they're like, I'm one of three.
Yep.
And, one of three women. And then the other two women on the, in their agency, they're butting heads. They're fighting for the same position. So you kind of have to remember, like, we've got to stick together. We have to uplift each other. We have to empower each other. And so I would say that's the key thing, being authentic, unapologetic, and remembering that your reputation will follow you throughout your career.
Yeah, absolutely. The reputation is huge. But I also think the mentorship is really important too, because I've worked at two departments. So I worked for Chicago PD, and now I moved to Florida. So now I work for a small department. So I've got to see both. And in Chicago, I've had so many great leaders and so many great female supervisors. And since I've been to Florida, I think I've had one or two, maybe in the last year. And it's just it's a different game. So yeah, you really do have to sometimes I've been the only girl on shift, which is definitely different than what I was used to. So finding that group of women, finding that support system, finding that community, 100% is so important. And I'm sure you have women reach out to you online, like asking you, maybe advice or questions and stuff like that. So as I do too, but I'm sure that people come to you, and I'm sure that you're very open with helping. And I know that we appreciate it because people like me look up to people like you. And, and speaking of that, you talked a little bit about the, is it LAPOW? Am I saying that right?
It's LAWPOA. So Los Angeles Women Police Officers and Associates. Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I saw that you were working with them and you've been involved in speaking out about advancing women in law enforcement and leadership. Can you talk a little bit more about that and why you're passionate about that, advancing women in leadership roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a nationwide initiative. It's called 30 by 30 to essentially increase the women in law enforcement in general by 30% by the year 2030. And women make up about 13% of law enforcement overall nationwide. And that's insane to me. And so really being part of this organization is about helping those women exceed and excel in leadership positions, of course, with that quality behind them as well. Like we want the best candidate. And it's not just about, just advance and promote the women. It's not that. It's the most qualified person. But it's about highlighting those women that are qualified, because sometimes when you have 20 men and only 1 or 2 females going for that position, who are our allies, who are our mentors, who are speaking out on our behalf. And so it's about helping them, break those barriers and blaze towards on that path. And it's, if you don't have that, you're fighting alone. You feel like you're fighting this battle by yourself. And so it's a great organization. We provide mentorship. We do mock orals.
That's great.
Yes, it's so awesome.
Yeah.
We're doing them right now. We have sergeant interviews coming up soon, and so it's been very empowering. And I'm currently the vice president of our group, but I work with a group of women that are all so unique and offer so much to this organization that I just wish everyone had the same opportunities that the women on this department have, because I'm so blessed for that.
How did you start this? How did you guys start this organization? Did you come to like your department and say, we want to start this? Or how did you guys go about making this?
So it's deemed an affinity group. And we are actually going to be celebrating 100 years of LAPOA.
Wow.
Yes.
So it's been around.
Yes. So I am just following in the footsteps of those who have paved the way before me. And our former president is now a deputy chief of our department. She's the first female Hispanic deputy chief of our department. The second highest ranking female on this department. We have 2 that are of equal rank, and they were both part of our board. So this has been a long time coming, and we're just continuing growing with what we do and offer for the women of this department.
It's amazing. I don't know if my department has that. So to not even know probably means we don't. But I think that it's something really important. I know Chicago did have a women's group. But yeah, I think it's really, if people are listening to this, if they work in a smaller department and they are a female voice, like to start something similar, to be able to help like the new girls coming in, because it is so hard when you're brand new to this career and you don't know anyone, you don't know what the heck is going on. Even when you're on like FTO, you have so many questions. You might not feel comfortable asking your FTO because he might be this older guy. Like, it's really important to have women mentorship. I didn't have a female FTO in any of my cycles. And I just thought, man, it would have been so cool to have at least had one cycle, like learning from a woman, just to see how she handles jobs, see how she handles calls. And it would have at least been nice to reach out to someone, because we don't necessarily do everything the same way as the men do.
Right. And we have different challenges. And so my very first training officer was a female. And I worked downtown Los Angeles. And I remember my second day, we were driving to a call and she took out her lip gloss and she was putting lip gloss on it. And I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, there really are women on this department, you know?
Yes.
And it was very eye-opening. And she's the one that actually told me, she said, Erika, I will tell you right now, your reputation will stay with you for the rest of your career. And so this is where it all begins. And she was the one that instilled that in me. And I think about her often because she was one of, I think maybe there was only 2 other female FTOs on our, working night shift at the time. But it's true. We had different challenges, right? Everything from the way our vest fits to having, to the locker rooms. There are some stations or some agencies that I've talked to where the females are like, we don't even have our own locker room. We have to go change in the bathroom. And so that's got to change. There has to be this you know, this shift at some point or another where we've stopped saying like, oh, she's the first this or the, the first female sergeant. And it's just crazy to me that going into 2025, we're still saying our first female supervisor, our first female FTO or chief. And so, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Just having that group. And like I said, so the National Association of Women in Law Enforcement, it's NALI. They're a nationwide group similar to the group that I am, and that helps for women in agencies that are smaller, to reach out to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. This is awesome information, especially for all the women who are going to be listening. I'm so excited for them to hear this. So tell us about a significant time in policing that you were a part of. And I know like in LA, there's gotta have been something that sticks out in your mind.
It's crazy. I have to say that it took about 15 years before some crazy stuff happened. And I would say that the riots in 2020 probably were the most significant in my career. So, that was only 4 years ago, but it was
Feels
major.
like yesterday, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It was probably, I would say, the most challenging time in my career. I have 3 small kids at home. And I think I worked 17 days straight without a day off, working 22-hour shifts. My husband was also working the same amount of, hours and days and time. And so it was crazy to see the amount of hate towards the cops for something that didn't even happen in this city, and trying to defend ourselves or myself, on a larger scale. And so I feel like that was the most challenging and difficult time in my career. My husband was also involved in an officer-involved shooting the very first night of the riots.
Oh my God.
And I remember driving. So we had they're called jail vans. And we were out just arresting protesters. And I remember driving this big jail van with, I think there were about 20 arrestees in the back. And my phone kept ringing. It's like 9:30 at night. My phone is ringing. And literally I'm driving through fire. Businesses are on fire.
Yep.
People are looting out in the streets. And I have this group of protesters in the back, and I get a call from my husband. I answer. I'm like, hello, like what? What do you need? And we're both in the middle of chaos.
Right.
And he says, I was just involved in a shooting. I can't talk. I'm okay. I have to go. And he hangs up.
Oh my God.
And my heart sank, and there was nothing I could do.
Nothing.
So
gotta keep working. Have to
Gotta
keep going.
working. So I drop all these arrestees off. I start making phone calls, but there was nothing I could do at that time.
Right.
And so it wasn't until about another 10 or so hours that I was able to talk to him again and see him. And it was the same thing. It was a group of looters, and it was this whole chaotic scene, like from a movie.
Yeah.
But that was a huge turning point in my career, both professionally and personally. Him being involved in that took a mental toll on him. And it just kind of rocked us to our core. It's taken a lot of healing to get through that.
Yeah.
It was tough. It was really tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't even imagine. My fiance was involved in a officer-involved shooting as well. And yeah, it's a lot. People don't realize. And like you said, you got to still go to work. You got to still be a mom. You still got to do everything like you were doing before.
Right. And you kind of feel like you don't know where to go from there. And just a few years prior to that, I was in the middle of the Las Vegas mass shooting, Route 91.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. With my husband and so I was going through my own healing journey from that.
Wow.
And then because he and I had different journeys, if you will. And then it wasn't until he had his officer-involved shooting that he understood like kind of the magnitude of what I was going through. So it was a tough, I would say, 4 to 5 years of trying to navigate through this department, being a mom, being a cop, being an advocate for other women, and still trying to support him
And support yourself.
and support myself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's been a lot.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
I'm still here. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Proud of you.
Thanks.
So I would say on a lighter note, but it's not really. I really do want to talk to you about your work in sex trafficking because it's something I'm personally very interested in. I did talk to another female officer who does sex trafficking on my podcast, and it was just so interesting and so cool. And I love to talk to women who work in sex trafficking because I think that people don't realize the longevity of the process. And I think people don't realize how much effort and time that you officers have to put into for these cases. And you have to be really dedicated. So can you tell us about your time working in sex trafficking? And, I have a specific question as well. Has it impacted the way you parent?
Ooh. So I'll answer that part first. Yes, absolutely. So for people that don't know, one of the biggest reasons people fall into sex trafficking is because of online and social media. And so that's a way that people are luring in young women and men into that world of sex trafficking. And so because of that, my 13-year-old who now has a phone, I'm super cautious of it. And someone who's on a social media platform, if you will, it's kind of, it's like a catch-22. So here I am putting myself out on social media, yet telling my kids like, you got to be careful. You have to be careful what you say. Everything that you type, everything that you text, everything that you send is saved. It's in the cloud. It's there. So yes, it definitely has changed the way that I parent. In that aspect, my guys are still kind of young, but as we navigate through social media as they get older, it is very prominent. And I remember telling friends when I first started into the human trafficking unit, how these men were luring young women through social media. And they were like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, you have no idea. These young kids are downloading Snapchat, downloading Instagram, and then they'll delete the app before they go home. So their parents never even know that they have accounts.
So crazy.
I know it's
Oh my
insane.
God.
So my time in human trafficking, initially it started with kind of the street walking prostitution, right? And so you would have literal like pimps that would procure young women who were working on the streets. Hey, like, you're so pretty. Let me take you to get your hair done. Let me take you to get your nails done. They'll meet at Walmart. They're meeting at Taco Bell. They're meeting at the mall. And these young women are vulnerable, right? And they're looking at all this social media like, oh, all these women are so pretty. Now here I have a guy telling me how pretty I am, that he wants to take care of me. And so that's how it begins. They're super nice. They're super sweet. And then they lure you in and they literally put you out on the street to work. They take your phone. They take your ID if you have one. They don't allow you to talk to your family. I've seen girls as young as 13 years old working these tracks. And so and people don't realize that it's happening in their backyard.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, how are we going to end this? What's happening? But then I think the most difficult part is helping these young women understand that they're victims. And so when a young person says, well, I want to do this.
Yeah.
This is what I like doing. I love him. He loves me.
Yeah.
People don't realize like how big of an impact that has on their life. Like you said, the longevity of the trauma that they start to endure, and they're brainwashed into believing that this lifestyle is okay. So initially that's how I started. And then I kind of got into more of the online pimping and pandering. And that was when propositions were changing and the laws were changing, and the justice system was finally kind of waking up and saying, this is the problem and we've got to fix this. And so they changed some of the laws, which really, kind of helped jumpstart this whole, human trafficking, trying to end modern day slavery, if you will.
Yeah. Wow. I can't. So I have a stepson. I don't have my own children yet. But even with him, I'm like, he plays like those games, like the Roblox and like all those games. And I see that there's chats, and like, you don't know who these people, like these people can filter into like your kid's gaming system. And I remember being young and like being at a friend's house and like sneaking onto chat rooms, like with my friends, and being like all excited to like sneakily go into chat rooms. I could never do it at my house because my dad was a cop and I was too scared. But if I would go to my friend's house, we would like go into the chat rooms, and I just can't. I remember that being like the most sneaky thing. But like now in today's world, I didn't have Facebook, I didn't have Instagram, Snapchat then. It's just like there's so many avenues now.
Yeah.
It's
And I
so
think
scary.
so many people think like, oh, it's not going to happen to me. My kids are smarter than that. But like you said, and some people aren't even aware that those chat groups are on, even on
Yeah.
the iPad, on Roblox. And
Yeah. There's
so
people that
yeah,
chat with them. Yeah.
and
They know that they're young kids on that app.
absolutely. My 13-year-old, he had the Snapchat app,
Mhm.
but he didn't have an account. But because all of his friends had it, it connected to their phone numbers. And so I was looking through it, and all of their locations were popping up. And
Yep.
it's like a Google Earth of their house.
Yep. It has
And
you where you live, like a little thing of you,
yeah,
and you get their location. Yeah. That's a
right.
huge point.
Yeah.
That's
And so I
crazy.
call his friend's mom. I'm like, hey, just to let you know, everyone in the world has access to his location. Jacob is at home right now. Here's his address. She's like,
Yeah.
what? I had no idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. And so then imagine you have these young women, these young females, these young girls that are vulnerable, and these men just, start to lure them in and send them messages. Oh, you're so pretty. Here's the little emojis. And I had one guy that sent a girl a Sephora gift card through her, Instagram or what have you. He asked for her phone number and he started sending her gift cards. And yeah, so it's pretty intense.
And like, to get to that place, like even as a 13-year-old, would you say like, what would you say is like the biggest contributing factor for someone to like go into that? Is it like absent parents in the home?
Yes,
Or
I definitely say that it has to be absent parenting. It's difficult to say otherwise.
yeah.
I think it's women who are, vulnerable, they're young, they don't have that guidance, that mentorship. And so that's definitely how they initially get into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So crazy. So on that sense, as parenting, what do you want your boys to learn from you most as a police officer mom?
So, I want them to know that I've got their back. I want them to know that I can put my mind to something and do it. I try to lead by example. And so I think that initially they didn't understand my role. They didn't understand my job. But with both parents in the position, they thought, oh, dad has the cool job. Dad's the one that's out on the street.
Yeah.
And so I lead by example, and we work out together, we meditate together.
I love
and I
that.
want to, so I show them, I lead by example, and I want them to know that, like, I've got their back, but they also can't get one over on me either. Yeah. But that their mom is strong and that their mom can do anything, and that women in general can do anything that they put their mind to. So.
I think that any boy growing up with a strong mom is going to be a good boy, like going to treat
Yeah, I
those
hope so.
women good. Yeah, I hope so too.
I hope so.
So you're a detective. What goals do you have for the future and what can we expect from you? I know you really love what you're doing right now, but is there
I
anything
do
else?
love what I'm doing. So I'm really happy with where I'm at right now in my career. I love what I
Mhm.
do. And technically I can retire in 5 years.
Amazing.
I don't know how my husband feels about that. But right now I'm really focusing on the position that I'm in as vice president of LAPO. I'm advocating for women, being that voice for them, mentoring and guiding, and just excited to see where that will lead me in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably really fulfilling for you. I wish I could join that group.
You can. We'll
Um,
take you in.
okay. If someone visits your page and like checks out your Instagram, what do you hope that their takeaway is from you?
So I want them to see that I've talked before about I have this platform. Sometimes I don't really know what to do with it, but then I get those messages from young women thanking me or asking questions, and then I'm like, this is my why.
Yep.
So I want women to know that they're not alone. I want people to know that they can accomplish whatever it is that they put their mind to, but also to see the human side in law enforcement. That, just because I put on a badge doesn't mean that I'm any different from anyone else, and that I still have a family to go home to. And I want people to feel like it's a safe space for them to reach out if they have questions. I'm open to healthy dialogue if that's the case as well. But I want them to know that I am here for them and that they're not alone.
Yeah. I do have to say, like on my personal page, I followed you a long time ago and I found it so cool and so interesting that you posted Ella French on your page because you're all the way in California. And if you know that she was my former partner and friend,
Yes.
and I have the chills. I'm like, like women across the country really were affected by her death. And it was I just appreciated that you, with such a strong female voice and platform, like posted my friend all the way out in California. So just wanted to thank you for that. But you do have like a awesome platform and voice. And I look forward to continuing to watch what you do with that.
Thank you for that.
Is there any final takeaways that you can leave with our listeners?
Just remain unapologetic at all times. I'm a firm believer for myself that I'm unapologetically myself, but you have to remember that you have to put yourself first. I always talk about you can't fill up anyone else's cup unless yours is full. And so remember to take care of yourself, put yourself first. And once you do that, everything else will kind of fall from there. I'm here if anyone ever wants to talk, if they want to reach out. And so I'm grateful to be a part of this, journey with you, and we're all in this together. So thank you.
Yeah, we definitely are. And I think that like in the future, I would love to get like all of us women, the women who I've had on this podcast, to like come together and do some sort of maybe Zoom meeting or whatever, meeting of the minds. I think it's so important to have like women from all across the country together. And I'm so excited that these women get to hear you and listen to you because you are this star on social media, but you are just like us. And a lot of things you said resonated with me. And I just think it's going to resonate with so many of my listeners. So I really, really, really appreciate everything you've done with your career, that you're a mom, a hard worker, a voice. Like there's so much you do. And I just think you are incredible. So thank you so, so much for your time. And maybe in the future, I'd love to have you on for a second interview. Maybe we could talk like deep about certain things like confidence in the workplace and stuff like that. So I'd love to talk on that further, but I know you're a busy woman, so I'm going to let you go.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to working with you in this journey, and thank you for having me, and stay safe out there. It's a crazy world. So thank you.
Thank you.